Ahoy ahoy to all you smooth sailors out there, and welcome aboard the DeckTales podcast. I'm your host and captain, Sammy Catlin, and this is the show where we set sail into the captivating world of ship life, delving into the best and worst experiences of the incredible crew members who called the open sea their workplace. Whether we're navigating stunning destinations to weathering unexpected storms, our guests all have stories to tell that will make you laugh, gasp, and maybe even shed a few tears. So, if you're a seasoned cruiser eagerly awaiting your next embarkation, or just curious as to what goes on at sea, DeckTales is your boarding pass to a world of nautical narratives. My guest today is Mr. Mark Taylor, a former cruise ship photographer who worked on board a number of ships for about 3 years before the digital age. Mark had more than enough stories to share and wasn't shy on the details, so let's anchor up and have a little listen.
Here we go.
Hello.
We're live.
We're live. I haven't got a theme tune, and it's all too easy to want to sing a certain song but change one of the words.
Right.
Which I'm not going to do, because I don't want them to come down on me like a ton of bricks. So what I'll do is I'll just do a bit of light-hearted improv just to kind of break the ice. I'll use my pen and do a little dance and say, DeckTales, yeah. Anyway.
Okay. That's a different podcast.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of alternate podcasts, a friend of mine was talking about doing a podcast for the essays and their stories from set. And he wanted to call it Background Action, which I thought sounded perfect. That's a great idea.
Sounds like backdoor action, though. It might come up on a few on the website things. Maybe that's just the way my mind works.
That's great to know. Obviously, going forward with this interview, what to expect, where the bar is. I don't know. We've got a bunch of questions we sent you over. We don't have to go through all of them. If as we're talking, we uncover some murky depths of your brain that have just been, brought to light or something.
Well, first of all, we discussed, or just anyone listening, how we met. We were obviously doing the background.
It's actually one of those days. One of those days like today.
Yeah.
Exactly how it is today. Is awful, torrential, grey, dark skies. And it was a film about the IRA.
Yeah.
And we were playing Irish mourners. And we didn't have to act too hard to look miserable.
Oh God, no! There was no stretch of the acting skills there. But the point is, like anything, when you're doing the background, you start chatting, and then of course you called out, and then you moved. So we didn't get to talk too much, but we found out. But we both worked on cruise ships when we were on the minibus, didn't we?
Right. That's right, yeah. And then after a bit, we get in, as you say, separated. You go over there, you go over there. And then we're talking to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 other people before the end of the day. Did you meet some other nice people that day?
I kind of blotted it from my memory, to be honest.
So just me then?
Yeah, just you, Sam. Yeah, no, not really.
It's very much a social outing for me whenever I'm on set.
Yeah.
When I'm working, and I'm generally just cracking on.
That's when you said that you were an entertainer or you worked on the entertainment staff.
That's right.
And I was a photographer. But funny enough, when I'd been photographer for about a year, I really thought about doing a little switch to entertainment stuff because it seemed a bit of a laugh. Maybe at all departments, they will look a bit better than your own, maybe, when you're going through a bit of a low point.
Yeah, well, people used to switch departments all the time, making the transfer from photo to shore excursions or...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, we didn't have much my time doing that, but...
No? Well...
maybe it was the crazy hours that we were doing at the time.
Yeah, so let's talk about the crazy hours. It's obviously, however long a contract is dependent on what you've signed. But on average, a cruise ship contract can basically range from around 3 months to 10 months.
Mine was 12 months.
Yours was 12. Okay, so above my average estimate.
But we'd get a break. In fact, I don't even remember renewing it. It just went on.
How long was your break?
Well, so let's go to the start. So basically, I was on cruise ships from 1988 to 1991.
Goodness.
So yeah, a little bit further back than you.
Yeah,
And
but so
the
3 years.
for 3 years. And I think maritime rules, maybe they are now. I don't know if they'd come into place when you were on there, but now you can't do any more than 53 hours per week.
I wasn't aware of
And
any
I was
such rule.
well, maybe. But when I was doing it, I was regularly doing 100 hours, even on one ship, 120 hours a week,
Yeah.
7 days a week. And then you'd get a break maybe after, there was no set time, but maybe after 9 months. There was no set time when they say, oh, you've got to have a break. It would be like, okay, Mark, maybe it's time you had a break now. And you go, okay.
You look a bit tired.
And then they would say, well, it's got to be at least 2 weeks. And a lot of photographers, they didn't even want to take that. If they were, especially if they were number 2 or number 1, where you're on the highest commission, they didn't want to take time off because they were losing money. Whereas for me, I pretty much knew that if I didn't, then I'd get burnt out and I wouldn't last as long anyway. So it didn't really matter to me. So I'd take 4 or 5 weeks off.
Yeah.
And I'd go and explore.
Well, so you didn't go home, you stayed somewhere nearby?
No, I didn't really have much back home anyway. So, yeah. So the first break ended up being 5 weeks, and I just flew over to Miami, carried on to Columbia in South Carolina, and then went through Greyhound all the way through Atlanta, Georgia, ended up in New Orleans, well, then through New Orleans to Houston. Hated Houston, got on the first flight out to San Diego, then got on the Amtrak, went up through LA and finished in San Francisco. So it was 5 weeks.
That's a fair journey.
All my luggage with me.
Yeah.
So you got to take all my camera equipment, all my tux, all your uniform, all these different things. And at the end of those 5 weeks, they said, well, could you stay another week? And I said, I've got $100 left. I've got to go back. And so they sent me back to the ship I'd left. So I could have left all my equipment there if I'd have known. I wouldn't have had to drag it around with me, but nothing's a certainty in those days. So,
goodness, yeah. Well, we are talking a long time ago. For context, about 32 years ago, I would have been 4 when you finished working on cruise ships.
So that's all I need, isn't it? Now, I mean, I was lucky. So I grew up in, I say lucky. So I grew up in a children's home, which meant that when I left there when I was 17, do all of that. So when I did go on the cruise ships at 23, I didn't have anything to miss. I didn't really have the family to miss. I had a brother. He was my only real kind of connection. And that made it easier in a lot of ways, which is why I went on my first vacation, I was able to could just go and tour the States and whatever and do all that. And I didn't miss it. Whereas other photographers, especially at Christmas, or the Americans over all their celebrations and all that sort of thing, Halloween, and then they really missed home. But for me, it was kind of okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember, I mean, especially being part of the entertainment stuff, you'd have to be working really hard over Christmas, didn't you?
It's basically where I started. I was in at the deep end at Christmas in 2006. And we had 2 weeks on board prior to any guests getting on board because it was in dry dock.
Oh, wow.
So we had the run of
lucky.
So we were docked in Gibraltar, dry docked in Gibraltar. Yeah. And the ship was in refurb mode, so everyone was in white overalls and, zhuzhing the place up. And we were going out on the piss every other night down in, Gibraltar sports bars and just enjoying life, getting to grips with some of the, the formats for the game shows we'd be doing and, the quizzes, etc. So it was an easy way to kind of, fall into the job. But at the time of year, it was like, okay, now the holiday's over, boom, we're in work now. So it was quite a dramatic shift from being like, oh, this is lovely. We can sit at the bar in our clothes, which obviously, as you know, is a big no-no.
Yeah.
We can't sit at the bar anywhere near the bar. That's passengers only. But obviously very different. So you've had 3 years, obviously, of your life dedicated to working on ships, and it's over a 32-year period ago. But it's still, you said to me on set that day we met that it's taken you like 20 years to get over, or it's it stayed with you for a very long time, those experiences at sea.
Yeah. I mean, weirdly enough, about 10 years after leaving cruise ships, I went on but I'd become married and a small kid, 12 months old. And we went on holiday and we went and stayed on a ship that I'd worked on. And it was a nightmare ship, actually. It was the Norway, which is a Norwegian Cruise Line's ship.
The Norway was the name of the ship, and it was an NCL ship.
It was their flagship at the time.
Right.
And it was the largest ship in the world in its time. And it was luxurious in lounges and that sort of thing.
And for those who don't know, what is a flagship?
The flagship is the main ship. It's the one that they say, this is, look, they like to be judged by that ship. That is our most luxurious ship. I mean, it used to be...
the Titanic.
No, it's the SS France.
That was the SS. So the SS France was NCL's flagship.
Norway.
All right, okay.
Yeah, because obviously a lot of ships, they've had different names in the past, unless it's a brand new one that's come out. And the SS France was I don't know what company it was, but it was like the best ship cruise ship in France at that time. And it had a run of about 20 years, and then they sold it on to NCL, and of course they changed it to SS Norway. And so beautiful lounges. And you're talking about 2,000 passengers on board, which in those days was the biggest ship in the world.
Yeah, that's more than what I had on my first ship.
Yeah. And it had two, what they call tenders, to take the passengers on board when you go into the island. But
lifeboats?
No, these were specialised tenders.
Right.
And a bit like what you do on a D-Day landing, where it had a big flap at the back and it would come down. So
God!
Off at the back. They had big cranes to take them off like that, and they were so big that both these boats were registered as ships in their own right.
Wow!
So this ship had two of its own ships on board.
That's ironic, because I always tell people when people confuse a ship for a boat, and they say, "Oh, it's a boat," and I'm like, "No, it's not a boat. A boat is something you get into if there's something wrong with the ship."
I don't think that's quite, but yes.
But with these things, the D-Day landing type vessels, they were literally that. How big we talking?
Well, I mean, I think you could probably fit about 300 people on each one.
Oh wow! Yeah, so that's that's almost the ferry.
Yeah, it was a small one. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's close sitting and it's all get in on there. Each one had its own crane, and the crane would pick it up, hoist it, turn it 45 degrees, put it down, and of course then it would go to the exit on one of the lower doors. And you remember sometimes the waves would be rocking all over the place. And this was skiff in the shape of a skiff, so with a flat bottom hull,
right, so
that it could take as big a load as possible.
Right,
so of course they would be bouncing quite a bit, but they were big. But when they got to the private island or wherever, then the back door could come down, and on this one particular place, the photographers, we'd have to get on the first skiff so that we could then run onto the beach like D-Day landings, but then turn around and photograph the passengers getting off the boat. And that's what we called a smudge. Okay, a photographic shoot was a smudge, and it was a crap shoot. Okay, it really was a rubbish idea. But our management, because it was commission only, they didn't care. And they were like, do this. And that's your percentage. So we'd go through it. And I remember just this guy just coming up and said, right, hold that. Let's get a picture. And he went, like that. And he goes, or just ignore me then. And then he came to shit. What do you say? And I went, I'm really sorry. I'm just so tired. I just said, and, bless him. He let me off. But, normally the only way that you could get your own back on passengers was to be sarcastic, because they didn't understand it if they were American, especially.
Oh yeah.
So we used to do things, the stress gets to you and whatever. And we'd have to. Another smudge was on the Buffet Magnifique.
The midnight buffet, Gala Magnifique, where the chefs and the galley staff all pull out all the stops.
Basically, it's using the scraps up and making them look posh.
Yeah, but then they zhuzh it up by having the ice sculpture and the fruit and veg carving. And by the end of the
Exactly.
evening, all of the fruit and veg carvings are swarming with fruit flies, and the ice sculptures looking very sad and droopy.
Well, this was the midnight buffet
Yeah,
magnifique, so
yeah.
they go on there. But we'd get them going up to it, and then if we really feel a bit annoyed, we'd get the lady and her husband, and we go, and we'd have to speak like a Cockney because that's what the Americans loved.
Yes, I can relate. They wanted
They
us
they
to lean
absolutely.
into your
So
southern.
you go, hello, darling. Grab hold of the let's get, and we go, let's get a picture of you with the old pig. So, what do you call my husband? And then I'd point and I go, no, the pig behind you. And there's this suckling pig with an apple in its
Oh,
mouth, like that. So you go like that, and then another, or if it's the other way, and you go, hello, mate. Yeah, get a picture of you with the old trout. And of course, there was a salmon or whatever behind them like that. Stand on the bollocks, and they didn't know what bollocks was, and so
what were you referring to with the bollocks?
it's just a line. You just call it the line the bollocks. Just stand on the bollocks, and they go, oh, okay, like that. If you point at someone and say that, and they don't know the word, they think that's the word you're talking about.
Right,
So
right. For a second, I thought there was like a tray of bollocks that you were serving up, and you were
see,
no,
it
no.
worked with you. You'd be the gorgeous American, so yeah, that'd be the fine.
Buffets have changed since the early 90s.
Yeah, they have.
I think they've stopped serving bollocks. But
So,
what
and they don't really do the midnight buffet as such, do they? They just do it up in the canteen and that's it, really.
they did him when I was on board still, and people used to say, "What time is the midnight buffet?"
Yeah, what time is the midnight buffet? Yeah,
It's
because they're
midnight.
good.
Yeah.
There you go.
What I wanted to ask you really quickly was when you said about the skiffs and they had the bottoms that
Yeah.
kind of landed like D-Day, getting the guests off the ship, and then obviously back on. That was an ordeal in its own right. It was surely quite
Well,
difficult.
as you know, they used to use the tenders were actually the lifeboats.
Right. Yeah.
Generally, on most ships, they'll use the lifeboats. Some they have bigger ones. They act as both a lifeboat and as a tender, right? But these, because they were specialised, they were a bit easier in that regard. So you come down, they'd have a little ramp come down so they could get, and because it was bigger, but because a lot of the passengers were old, of course, if it was rough,
Yeah.
then it would be a bit of an ordeal. I mean, I worked on an old Greek ship, and we're talking a proper hull. There was no stabilizers in there, no side thrusters in it. So it'd been built in 1936.
Wow.
So the waves were really going up and down like this, and the old people were trying to get on and off, and it was an accident just waiting to happen. Like
it was
that.
always dicey, even when
Yeah.
I was on it.
Exactly, it's always dicey, but obviously with this big skiff, because it was on a bigger ship, it's more solid, and the captain will turn the ship so that it keeps it out of the wind, and so that's when you but again, because this Greek ship didn't have side thrusters, it wasn't so easy to get into a position. Now the big 165,000-ton ships, they will be able to turn around, and it's pretty much flattens it down a lot.
But so you didn't have like the flat down. They didn't like open out into the water. It would like they would go onto a
it
deck.
would be raised up. You'd come onto it through the side. So you'd have the side door
Right.
on
Okay.
deck 3 or 4, and then you'd go and you'd have the large tender that we had on the Norway, and you just come out through the side, just like you would with the smaller tenders. But it was a bit higher up. It was much better. It was much better for getting on and off, because these had the exit ramp on them. Then they could just come off to a beach. But most of the time, of course, you'd have to have a jetty. But because these had an exit ramp, they were able to go onto the beach itself and put it down, so people could walk onto the beach. Which means with the private island, I mean, you could get more of those at a time, because sometimes on these piers you could only get 1 or 2 tenders on at a time. And again, now with the ships the size that they are now, with 6,000, they are so big that they can't dock at a lot of ports now, because they are 165,000 tons in size, or 185,000. One of them is going to be soon.
I think isn't the newest one over 200? I think they are over 200.
Really? Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you're getting up to 7,000 passengers on
9,000 souls easily.
Yeah, exactly. So once you've got the crew on as well and all that, sort of 10,000. It's on there, and it just takes forever to get people off. That's the problem with the big
Mm-hmm.
ships. They've got all the entertainment.
Mm.
You've got an amazing choice, but it can take a long time. And if you're in port late because the weather's a bit choppy, and then you've still got to leave at 5:30 p.m. because they want to get you on board again as quickly as possible so that you start buying drinks and spending money in the shops and doing
And the
all
casino
the
and
yeah. See, I mean, back in my day, you'd get back on maybe 7:30 p.m. or something like that. They weren't so much thinking about that money opportunity. Now they've got all time in the world to get you back on board, but they get you back on by about 5:30 exactly for the money. And that's annoying because if you don't get in and then you get delayed and then you can't get off till 11 a.m., 12 a.m., you're literally down to about 4 hours of safe window of opportunity to go off and do what you want to do.
Mm.
If so, you can't really get further than the harbour itself. I've traveled, I've cruised quite a bit now as a tourist.
What would you say, about the same amount of time as you went on spent on the ship whilst you were working?
Oh God, no! But I mean, I've probably been on about. Obviously, I was 3 years, and it was about 150 cruises. But
Yeah,
so because some cruises are a little bit shorter, some maybe 10-day cruises we used to do out of Venice.
Yeah. They come in all shapes and sizes, whether they be 2, 3, 4 days, or a week, 3.5 months around the world cruise. Pick and choose. It's up to you. And obviously, and I was lucky enough to be able to do the world cruise. That was easily one of the best experiences I had. And it was, towards the back end of the ship's life. So it was like, it was good timing. It was quite fortuitous. And I was unlucky enough to be made redundant towards the back end of that cruise because one of its sister ships was called the Black Prince, and the ship was going through a storm. Ill-advisedly, the captain took it into it, and what happened was a load of TVs, which were improperly mounted, fell on guests in their cabins, so they suffered loads of lawsuits, and the company had to liquidate.
Oh God!
And as I was the last member to join the entertainment team, I was the first to go. So I missed out on the back-to-back world cruise that was going in the opposite direction, which I was so gutted about. But, swings and roundabouts. I had just been to loads of lovely places.
You're lucky you got on it because, I mean, I told my head office that I wanted to do. I'd heard of these cruises in the Far East and they were, a 2-month cruise and this sort of stuff at the time, or even a month. And they go, oh, you don't want to go on there. It's boring. It's no money. And it's true, the money would have been, it's rubbish, but that wasn't important to me. It would have been getting out and seeing it. See, but the difference is, I suppose, back then as chief photographer, on a good ship, I'd be on $1,200 a week, tax-free, no rent, no mortgage, no food to pay for. That's it. So if you are losing out, if you're on a ship where you're only ending up getting $300 a week, that's a lot every week to lose on your earnings. So a lot of the photographers did become money orientated.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of departments do. Obviously, if that's how much you were earning a week back in 91, well, 89 or whatever it was, you did the right thing to stay in photography and not bother to do light entertainment, Mark.
I knew I'd be sacrificing that bit.
We didn't get no tips. We didn't have no commission structure. We just made the people laugh. That was what we did.
Oh, we didn't get tips.
No, we didn't get. No, yeah. Sorry, you didn't get tips
either. And this was the crazy thing. So all the other departments got tips, and our bosses were trying to cut down our commission all the time. And I think they shared. It was something like 12.5% shared between 3 photographers, say. So the chief photographer gets 7, number 2 would get 4%, and number 3 would get 1.75% out of whatever. So on one cruise, for some reason, the credit chits that we used to use, we'd run out. So we had to use the bar chits. And the bar chits got written on them, 15% will be added to your bill.
What?
That's just, that was the tip that you used to give to the Americans would give just automatically be put onto their bill. for.
Yeah.
15% will be added to your bill as a tip to the bar waiting staff.
Mm.
We weren't getting that. We were just using their paper chips. That's all it was. But they didn't. Nobody put up a fuss about that 15%. And in the end, you'd think, if they'd have really thought about it, the managers, they would have said, you know what, just put that 15% on for the photographers. The head office could have, instead of paying us 12% between three people, they could have just given about 3, 4, 5%. And that difference made it more effective for them. They could have invested where they needed to. And we'd have still been on collectively about 17 or 18%. So we would have been better off. They would have been better off. It's just the passenger who wouldn't have been better off. We're talking about me going back on cruise ships again. So I got onto the Norway. And because I was trying to get used to not being on cruise ships anymore. And this is my first time back on cruise ships. So, but this time with a wife and a 12-month-old daughter. And I have to, it was for a week. It was around the Caribbean again. And it was on the Norway, which was a horrendous ship to work on because it was so busy. But it was lovely to see it as a passenger. But I kept wandering around the crew areas and wanting just to go down to the crew bar. And you just got that kind of, it's a town of its own, isn't it? Really, a cruise ship.
So
life and knowing people.
Did you get a small case of FOMO, like what was going on behind closed doors?
Huge, yeah. And then I'd go on cruises after. I went on with my brother, I went on with a girlfriend, and every time one girlfriend, I just said, look, I'm going to go down. And I went down to the crew where the door was, and I could hear all the music of a party going on. And I wasn't a party animal in my time, but I still wanted to just be part of that. I didn't want to. I suppose it's where, as you get older and you do settle down and you have all these sort of things, you have to sacrifice. Well, you have to grow up, basically. And then you go back on a cruise ship and it's like visiting your youth again. And you go, like Peter Pan, I don't want to grow up. I want to stay in Neverland. And I don't want,
That's what we're doing today, Mark. We're going back to the time when you were allowing yourself that time to be Peter Pan and just explore and travel and broaden your cultural horizons, shall we say.
Yeah. But I mean, it is that. And it is, but I think I told you that I left because I didn't want to become institutionalized. And I think you thought I was talking like a mental hospital or something like that. But what I mean is in the fact that because I grew up in care, where everything's done for you. As you did come back actually, and you said, about that. And because you have all your food, everything's cooked for you. You have your washing done for you, your rooms, and it's not the same as being back on land. And I suppose I just seen a chief photographer who was a great photographer and whatever, and he tried to leave the cruise ships, but he just kept feeling the draw. He couldn't make it. He couldn't make as much money back on land,
and he hated having to make his own bed.
Well, possibly couldn't cook to save his life, and it was obviously before Deliveroo, so he had to go back onto the cruise ships. He was from the days before me when they were earning big bucks. I mean, it was on the Norway about maybe 8 years beforehand.
Right.
Before they went on a credit system, they were just taking cash. Everywhere was taking cash. So to take, even then, on the chief photographer on there, because it was a 6-man ship, and it's the biggest one, would be on about $2,000 a week. But because they were on a slightly higher percentage, he was about 2,000, maybe a little bit more. But he was on the fiddle. So he was more like on $4,000 a week.
Crikey.
Possibly even 5,000, which you imagine. And that's why he didn't want to take any time off, because he didn't want to lose the ship either. And he'd be paying off the number 2 photographer to do some of his work for him. And number 3 would be getting a backhander as well. So there was this whole system. So money was going through the system. So when the cruise ship picture company, our company, because we were a concession, they said, right, all the ships are now going to go credit. Suddenly, 5 out of the 6 photographers handed their notice in. They just left. And the first week, the takings went like this from on the ship, because obviously there was no way of taking the cash from it, and that's where they could see what was happening and how much money. They probably guessed some money was going, but they probably never thought that would happen. And unfortunately, one of the photographers, I don't know how he was still in contact with the company. I don't know why they put up with him, but this guy had been making so much money that he took his own captain's license while being a cruise ship photographer for sailing small yachts and stuff like that. And he ended up with all the money that he'd made, because you're talking over 200,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that. He took that money and he set up a business where he's delivering yachts around the Caribbean.
So he would drive them to the person who bought it.
It just meant that you're legally, he would be delivering the boat. So if anybody's had a boat bought and they buy it, it's been bought in Miami, it then could be delivered to St. Lucia or Beckway or Grenada or wherever it is in the islands. So anyone who tells me Prime doesn't pay, really, it's rubbish.
Have you still got his details? I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah, no, I never got on with him, funny enough. So I only met him. I heard about him, and then I met him the once, and he was with some of the managers of and I'm like, how can you still be in contact with these people? Because they must know you're on the take.
And this is obviously the days before Facebook and social media.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, so now people working on cruise ships, not only do they have when I was talking to the last photographers, and this would have been about 10 years ago, they said, well, we're not allowed to do any more than 53 hours per week, which means that they need more photographers to cover the different hours. But now, because it's digital, they don't have to print all the photographs up either. They don't have to load all the film. They don't have to process the film and process the pictures and cut them up. It means they don't have to sell them because they have to put them up on the wall. So they are much less hours now than they used to be. So...
and also people are looking at, I know that even when I was on, the first smartphone was the iPhone back in 2007. And so touchscreen, cameras and that lot didn't really come in until about halfway through my cruise ship tenure. But obviously when the photography team put all the pictures out on the wall, you'd see some people going up with their digital camera.
Oh, yeah.
And then trying to get like a cheeky picture of the picture so they didn't have to pay for it. Now, what's stopping anyone just getting out their smartphone and just going and taking a picture of the picture? Like, why do they need to have...
Now it is all digital anyway, so you have to go onto a monitor and then you put in your cabin number.
Right.
And that's how they find the pictures they want. And in our day, not only did we print everything out and chop all the pictures, then put them up on the wall, which could take a long time just doing that.
What a palaver.
Oh, yeah. And we'd only sell 20% of our prints as well.
So what did you do with the rest?
But that used to be the question that a lot of customers wanted to try and get a bargain. So what are you going to do if we don't buy your pictures? We say things like, we make them into jigsaw puzzles for the blind, or we sell them to third world countries, so they use them as wallpaper. If you don't buy these pictures, your photos will be over someone's hut in Africa, or something, just anything.
Oh God!
To do that, but it would just get thrown away. It was so much waste.
Yeah,
but
that's the nature of the beast.
It's the nature of the beast, because if they didn't see the picture, they weren't going to buy it. I mean, I learned this lesson on one cruise I was seeing a girl at one of the passengers that week, which was a no-no anyway. But anyway, I was seeing one of the passengers.
Tisk mark.
Yeah, that's a story in itself. And she'd gone off one night and she'd done something that annoyed me or whatever. She was flirting with one of the other guys and I didn't like it, and all puffy. So I thought, well, I can't sleep tonight. So I went back, and instead of going to sleep, I just went and printed the photographs that we shot that night, which is because there was no need to get them out so quick because we already had other photos. But because they were done, we put them up in the shop the next day, and we sold double the amount of photographs, purely because it was closer to the event when we photographed. So I learned very quickly from that little escapade that the quicker we can get the pictures out, the more photographs we'll send. So on another ship, after the formal night, I'd start work at 7 a.m. in the morning in Grand Cayman, but going down, photographing someone dressed as a pirate. Then we get set up for formal night. Then we'd be photographing one in the shop, doing the night, and then getting something to eat at the midnight buffet. And then I'd start printing about 1 a.m. and finish at 9:30 a.m. the following morning. So I'd done a 26.5-hour day every Thursday. But that had a twofold thing. One, that meant we got the pictures out quicker, so we made more money. But it also meant that I got 4 hours in Cozumel to go to Carlos and Charlie's. So basically, it was
to go where?
Carlos and Charlie's. It was like a bar in Cozumel. So I get to bed at 9:30 a.m., wake up about 4.5 hours later, hit the gym, and then we'd go out into Cozumel, and we'd have about 4 hours there, and then we'd have to get back on by 10 p.m. in time for the country and western night, where everybody was doing the electric slide and eating dead chicken and ribs. So,
eating what?
Dead chicken and ribs.
Dead chicken.
Dead chicken and ribs is how they used to.
Obviously not live chicken.
That was the entertainment staff called it that. Come on.
I've not heard that one before. Before my time. Yeah. We weren't calling it dead chicken and ribs.
Stop saying before my time, you.
Sorry, Mark.
You were talking about communicating with people back home.
Yeah.
So again, to feel old, our way was pen and paper.
Yeah.
That was it. Or every now and again, you go into Miami, Port of Miami, there would be places where you could pay quite a bit and you could use the telephones but you'd have to book it and say, this is the number, and they dial it through for you. And then you could talk to someone back home. And the only person I'd call was my brother. And I did feel bad because sometimes I'd say, well, I'm in Miami, or I'm in Barbados, or I'm in Venice, or I'm in, some other part of the world. So that was quite cool.
And where was he all this time?
He was back home in Surrey. So it was just,
yeah. There's that dilemma in your mind. Like, I don't want to name drop all these wonderful places and give him a complex or anything, because it just feels like you're showing off when really you're just, you're living your best life, Mark.
Well, no, I was showing off to my brother because obviously there was a rivalry. But yeah, when I did come back, and you're just talking to your mates, and nothing's changed in their life after a year and a half. Of course not. It's just life goes on as usual. But you're sitting there and I say, oh, yeah, well, we were just doing that. And we'd do that in Barbados, or, we'd do this and that. And this girl behind her, we didn't know, she said, who do you think you are? Oh, you've been to this place, you've been to that place. And I said, no, that's just I'm just saying, it's trying to talk about what you've been up to without saying.
Yeah.
But after that, I've tried even harder not to sound like I'm showing off, because it's just your life. You don't go home and watch EastEnders. You're literally you're doing one of the cruise shows, because I used to help out on the cruise shows as well, and do all that sort of.
Well, the pace of life at sea is like in many regards a fifth gear compared to first or second back home on land, where you're either just commuting to the same place every day and traffic is always the same, and the weather's awful half the time. So
we'd always be going to the midnight buffet to get something to eat.
Yeah.
And then invariably we'd be out and whatever, and your curfew was 2 a.m. You're not allowed out in public areas after 2 a.m. But if you met a girl or something, you'd be walking behind some dark deck or something to about 3 a.m. and then you're up again at 6:30, 7 a.m. the next day to start again.
You learn pretty quick to light the candle at both ends.
I was exhausted. Absolutely exhausted after a few months, and then you just go.
Did all of your notes or your paper written letters to your handwritten letters to your brother, did they make it?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
There wasn't like why haven't you been in touch? He was worried about you. Nothing like that.
No. It's a game. But that's where you could really. You didn't know what was going on. I remember we were going through the Med, and the head office said, "Oh, where are you going on this cruise?" I said, "Well, we're going off into Port Said in Egypt." And they went, "Well, even with the war going on?" I went, "What? Well, sorry, what are you talking about?" And it was the first qualms of the first Gulf War. when they first went into Iraq, when the Americans went into Iraq, and we went past some oil fields over the coast of Egypt, but we had to have our lights off, we had security and all that sort of thing, but we didn't even know about it until we were there. So
that information hadn't reached anyone on board. It was just
it was quite nice for that. You just kind of just have your own life to get on with. And again, very lucky time. One of my cruises I really used to enjoy doing was out of Venice, but we go down through the canal up to Istanbul, and then we go through the Dardanelles into the Black Sea to the Ukraine. So we're going to Yalta and Odessa when Russia was still communist. It was still CCCP and or USSR, and we were allowed off because we were on a seaman's visa.
But your seafarer's visa was enough.
Yeah, we could get off and we'd just go, and people were selling TikToks to us, and I don't mean the website. And just watches. They still work. I've got a few watches from there. And then when you go and try and buy anything, you go in a shop, it's near enough empty. I mean, I went in a cafeteria and they had just a smell of cabbage hit your nose anyway. And the cutlery was all bent up knives and forks, and so nothing matched. None of the plates or the bowls or anything matched. And I just felt guilty. I felt like I was taking their food from them. It was just crazy. I saw another line, and this whole line was just waiting to buy plastic belts. But then you found the black market around the corner, and it's all suddenly they've got lots of fruit and veg and all that sort of stuff. But the official places, it was tough. And I'm very fortunate to have seen it like that.
I have similar experiences of being in impoverished areas and having that kind of same unsettled guilt trip feeling. You're not sure how to process it necessarily.
No, you're not. And the world is changing all the time, so places aren't like they were. I mean, I used to go to Venezuela as well. I used to go to La Guaira, which is the little port, which was a dive of a place. We'd come in, and it was very steep hills and shacks built, basically, because they'd been given free land to build, but there was no proper plumbing or anything like that. All the electrics, dodgy wiring and generators, and it's low hung cloud over it, so it looked very kind of mysterious and amazing to go. And you go in, everything was cheap, and so you go. I mean, the first week we were there, me and Chris, we'd been put on a ship as a kind of punishment. Anyway, this old ship, and we went up to a restaurant. We just ordered everything on the menu because it was so cheap, and we were just stuffing our faces, enjoying it, and a filet mignon and the wine and all that. And then suddenly I went, "What time's the ship leave?" I don't know. We didn't know. We suddenly, and we had to throw money down and run as fast as our fat little legs would take us. And they were literally just about to take the gangway up.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And had you have been stuck at that point, what would the process have been to get yourself back on board?
As soon as that ship leaves the port, you are illegally in that country, because your country of where you're living, if you like, is the ship. So your country is left without you. Literally, it's seen that way. That's why they call it seaman's visa. I think it was a B-52, funny enough, something like that. So, because otherwise you are illegally in that country. If the ship had gone, and this is the same for a passenger, you are flown out of that country as fast as possible, no matter what the cost. If you have to be put up in a hotel, it's where they know and they've authorized, but you will be out there and you are sent to the next port of destination for that. And the captain would, I mean, you may have seen when a passenger just misses the ship, and then, so the pilot boat, now the pilot boat is obviously the local guide who guides the ship out.
Mm-hmm.
The passengers would get on the pilot boat, and then it would run aside the ship, and then they would have to get up a little ladder or something like that. And quite a few of the passengers would all line up over the side, having a look down, laughing their head off at these passengers who are getting on at love. Otherwise, that's it, they're stuffed. So I've seen that a few times.
Yeah, no one wants to be that person stuck on.
Well, if they would have said, why doesn't the captain just bring the ship in? But it costs extra money because you've pulled out, and then it's more fuel to pull in, and all that sort of stuff. And also, the captain, otherwise known as the master, he doesn't want to belittle himself with that sort of thing. But only once did I hear where the captain didn't. He saw one of the dancers, and she's frantically going like this. I've missed my ship. I've missed my ship. She's on the harbour side. She's waving away from the captain, who's standing on the bridge side, pulls the ship back in like that. Wow. She got back on board, and then the ship pulled out. And only then did she realise she was on the wrong ship.
Oh, God. So the captain stopped for the wrong
Apparently so. But then you hear these stories. I mean, it's just maybe this is just what I'd heard. So I worked for Chandris, which was the first cruise line that evolved into celebrity cruise lines. And then when I was in time, they were a dodgy outfit. So the ship I was on was really old and all that sort of stuff. But we'd heard about a ship called the Romanza. And every summer, what were known as the New York Jews, all the survivors of the Holocaust and whatever, they would come down to Miami, and then they would go on a cruise and celebrate surviving the Holocaust. The rumor came out that before the ship was called the Romanza, it was called the SS Hitler because it had been a Nazi hospital ship.
That was the rumor.
That was that's what they started saying. And you believe it. You believe it. So because it sounds such a great invented story.
But it has to be true.
It may well be true that it was, because I can't find the information.
I haven't seen anything about a ship being called the SS Hitler, but then maybe it was stricken from the records.
Exactly. Who knows on that sort of thing? But it's just the kind of warped kind of mind. I mean, the ship that I worked on the Azure, and that was it had once been a car ferry called the Eagle going out of Southampton down to northern Spain. And I'd heard that it sunk, and then the Griggs had brought it back up because they're great at salvaging things, and decided to make it into a cruise ship instead. So where the cars used to be, they put in cabins. Only half of that story was true in the end. I only found that out a few weeks ago because I'm researching for my own book. And it turns out, yes, it had been the Eagle. It never sunk, but for commercial reasons, they decided to put in and turn it into a cruise ship. The problem was because it was a cargo and car ferry, it had a very flat keel, and because it would take a lot of weight, but being cabins for people, it's going to be a lot lighter. So it meant it was very high above the waterline. And I'd done a transatlantic cruise on it, which meant that we're going across the sea for 7 days. The front of the boat would go up like that, the front of the ship would go up like that. I'd be in my cabin, which is near the front, and the G-force would make me sink into the bunk bed a little bit like that. So it would go up like that, and then it would slam down like that. So you sink, slightly float, and then as it went tips like that, the propeller would catch a little bit of air and go. 7 days of that. So,
oh my God.
Sink, float, sink, float. We had 500 Germans on board on a converted car ferry, basically. Right, she had never been doing that transatlantic as light as it was.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And one woman, they're midway through the Atlantic, and she managed to get hold of the captain and demands to be airlifted off the ship. She's so sick. And he goes, no, you can't even get a helicopter this far. Anyway, you cannot be airlifted. You've got no choice. You are going to have to make it as far as we're going. So the first port of call, they got to Gibraltar, and about 15 passengers got off. They'd had enough. It was meant to be finishing over in Italy, but they just couldn't bear it, even though they'd gone through the worst. But the woman who demanded to be taken off stayed. Can you think why?
Started seeing the captain.
Almost. She started seeing one of the other Germans. Yeah, they actually somehow over their sick bags, they kind of fallen for each other.
Oh, it's so weirdly romantic.
Yeah.
It's sicklingly romantic.
Sickeningly, well, yeah, it makes me want to puke thinking about it. That was probably the roughest cruise I've. I have been on a ship where it keeled over quite a bit, and well, a bit like your TV's coming out. Everything came off, all the tables, all the crockery, and all that sort of stuff. But it was very rare. I mean, all the ships that I worked on, even when we were doing the med, the currency on board was dollars all the time. But the thing is, people used to look at photographers, and we'd be going around because for those who've never worked on a cruise ship, when you're cruise staff, we were in a fortunate position of being able to go into public areas, whereas a lot of the deckhands, whatever, they're not allowed in the public areas, of course.
Yeah, there's any like customer facing position on board, basically.
Yeah,
you're allowed to be in and around passenger areas and buy a coffee, sit down, essentially.
Yes, I mean, yeah, maybe I should have had those rules explained to me a bit more, because I got kicked off my first ship for dancing too much.
You got kicked off your first ship for dancing too much?
Yeah, you did hear that right. Yeah, I mean, whether I was just dancing too much, I didn't really get on with the photographers very well because I didn't drink, and the chief photographer was an alcoholic.
Oh, right, yeah, there's a lot of that.
I mean, borderline, there's a lot of that because of the stresses of the job as well, pushes to that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I got called and said, right, Mark, you're going to be getting off tomorrow. So just take all your stuff. You're going to be joining the Victoria, which is a Greek ship. It'll be alongside this ship. And I said, oh, okay, why? They said, well, you've not really made the grade, really, and they didn't like you dancing. The officers didn't like you dancing. I thought, but I'm in a public lounge. Oh, yeah, I was dancing. I used to like a bit of a boogie back in the day.
Well, you were like 23.
Yeah, 23, 24. Just have a word with me and say, look, Mike, don't do that. But it was all kind of, the Norwegians never said, they're all very polite, the Norwegian officers. So I got taken off that. I remember getting my belts and all the clothes on the hangers, hang off the belt so I could carry them all in about 3 different walks between the 2 ships to take all my stuff over. And weirdly, because I was still number 3 on it, so what we called the shagger, so the one who does all the work, you just shagged out all the time, you're just knackered.
Well, on the tier system of photographers.
On the tier, you had the chief photographer, or the number 1, then you'd have the number 2 and number 3. It was 4-man ship, 4-man, and so and so. Anyway, so I was kicked off, and as a punishment, sent onto this ship called the Victoria, and that was a Chagrin ship, and it was built in 1936 in Belfast, and this was 1989. And when you go into your cabin, you turn the light on, and the walls would shimmer. I didn't know what that was at first, and then I realised it was all the cockroaches hiding behind the mirrors, all the cracks in the walls, everything like that. The shower was a communal shower, and it looked like a scene from Midnight Express.
What? Wait. Sorry, let me just recap. You were fired were you fired, or were you just repurposed?
I was, well, this is the stupid thing. I was kicked off, or I was transferred. Let's say transferred. And at that time, from a number 3 onto a ship, and my number 2, he made it quite clear that he knew my photography was really good. Actually, it was really high standard, but he just didn't get on with me, and he didn't like that. We'd never got on since the day I joined with him. So he said, "You're going on their ship," and he said, "And you've been lucky on this ship. This is a luxury ship. I told you, I warned you. Now you're going on the shitty Victoria."
Oh yeah, so you were downgraded for your
downgraded. But when I went onto the other ship, it was that was another 3-man ship. They were down 1 photographer, and they put me on as joint number 2. So I kind of got a promotion with the transfer,
That's a lovely way of spinning a positive onto it.
Exactly. But we literally, I got on really well with this guy. Because I used to run processing labs, I knew exactly what was going on that ship. All the chemistry was terrible. It was an old aluminium tank there for dip and dunk process for all the films. And the chemistry was bad. So we were all coming out dark, we were coming out with a magenta tint. The photography was poor. And so in a week, we were able to put the quality right up. And at the same time, cut out all the crap photographs as well, all the silly ones that just annoy the passengers. So they end up buying more pictures from you. So within 3 months, I was the chief photo on there. So yeah, I turned it around, and I was breaking all records. That's when I then went on my tour, came back as chief photographer again.
To the same ship?
Onto that same ship. They put me back because nobody had break. So they had what they called a daily rate. They work out all the photographs you sent and how much you make off each passenger per day, like that. And I think it was something like $1.20 or something. Well, all the normal ships would be about $3 per day, that sort of thing. So I got it right up to about $3. It'd never been that high before. So yeah, and I was very happy with that. And that's where I learned my craft on that one. If the machines broke down, I could fix them, because you can't bring on an engineer when you're in the middle of the Caribbean. You've got to just find a way to make it work. So yeah, as a reward, then I got some really good ships after that. So really, as you say, you get kicked off the first one, and I knew it's just a guy I was with, really, and worried. But you that's the problem. When you said you got to your first ship, you had 2 weeks in dry dock to be trained on what you were doing.
That was a luxury in itself.
Yeah, when I got there, so I got taken to the pier. The guy came out, looked at me as if like that, and then told me that basically the chief photographer who normally runs the ship is on holiday, and his mates are now running it, and they wanted to break all records on there to prove their point. And they didn't want to do it wet nursing a brand new photographer. So it wasn't a good start. He gave me a couple of hours to sort myself out, and I was set to work. So by 4 p.m. I started on there of the same day, photographing all the new passengers coming on board. I finished shooting 6 hours later. Then we had to get all the processing board. I got to bed about midnight and started the next day getting ready for formal day. So literally hit the ground running.
Yeah, straight into the lines then.
Yeah, and that's. But in a way, I've done it a few times, and you do learn your craft really well, because there's such. You have a break, or you prove something, and my photography was just way and above most people's in doing social photography. I'd get new photographers come out, and they've got a degree in photography or whatever. I had a diploma level or whatever in general photography. I'd worked in some studios, but they'd have a degree in art photography and all these sort of things. But they couldn't take a photograph because they would spend so much time trying to talk a passenger into having their photograph taken that the passenger would go no. They would come up, and it's maybe at a restaurant, which is one of the hardest shots. And they go and say, "Excuse me, can I have a photograph taken?" And they go, "What? Have a photograph taken? Just maybe you two together? You want a photograph? I don't know. Do I want a photograph?" And by the time they actually agree to the photograph, he's panicking. So he goes, takes the picture so fast that he doesn't notice the flowers going up the nose of the people. You've got little flowers on the table, or a bottle of wine in the way, or too much space above the head. It's about getting the composition exactly right, because we couldn't crop later. No. What you shoot is what you print. So you do all that. They couldn't take a picture, whereas the idea would come up. You make it, you go up, you be friendly, you go, "Hi there, folks. Well, I'm just going to get a picture of you and your girlfriend together. That's it, in nice and close." And you make it fun so that when one table hears them having a laugh, when you come over, they know you're about to arrive and that they look forward to it. Yeah. As soon as someone says no, like sheep, they all begin falling inside. They say, "Oh, okay, well, then maybe we won't," and all that sort of thing. So it's tough. So as you're coming off a tour, when you get into port, all the passengers will come off on a gangway. We put a life ring up with the name of the port on it. So it's a picture of you in there. You're using flash, so it's beautiful blue skies. You can see the view. But if you're going, "Excuse me," then they all walk past. So it says, "Hi, folks, just stop there. And the next two, thank you very much." And the next, it's like you're politely giving them an instruction, an order.
Yeah.
Human beings are very good at being told what to do.
It's not a request, it's a, polite demand. Yeah, just to make it easier on them and obviously yourselves.
As soon as you lose one person, then they all start walking past. So that's part of the training of what we do anyway in photography.
When you're working on a ship, it's 7 days a week. So was there anything in particular that you used to do to make time for yourself, and how would you wind down?
Well, there was, as I say, when we used to go into Grand Cayman, I'd start at 7 a.m. till 9:30 a.m. the next day, so that we'd have time the next day. That was, so you could only sort of concentrate maybe all the printing into some point. I'd go and do the Kon-Tiki tour when we got into, I think it was Martinique, and it would go off and they'd have an hour on the beach when they get there, and you photograph them doing the limbo on the way back and all that sort of stuff. Again, scrappy little shoot, but that's when you sleep. So it was just fitting in sleep. But then I'd get sunburnt as well if I wasn't careful, because you just kind of, and you have a couple of the rum punches while you're there because it tastes like fruit juice.
Not to.
It's very, very strong rum. So you just can't taste it. So it's a bit too much. So I didn't drink much, but when I did, it was a strong rum.
What would you say is one of the biggest learning points from your 3 years at sea that you wouldn't have necessarily, for a fact that you wouldn't have learned if you hadn't been at sea?
Resilience. I mean, that was, I had a bit of that because of some other experiences I'd had before. I suppose it was a way of proving my resilience because, as I said before, you couldn't get an engineer on board when you're in the middle of the ocean. I learnt through printing quickly at night that the quicker you got something out, the more you're going to sell. And I learned that quality sells, and then you can cut out the rubbish. So I learned that I was actually quite good at managing, really, that sort of thing. It was because it's like running your own business. Because you're there and you're trying to get the take up and you're making sure that the staff are trained and they're happy. It's at that time of your age, when you're that age, that's when you first become a man, really, isn't it? In your early 20s, you become and start doing grown-up things and you get a bit more confidence, more worldly wise, really. So that was the environment in which I learned that. And I mean, I think you've got to travel to find those kind of things out anyway. I mean, I'd already been, a few years before the cruise ships, I'd been to Honduras for a few months doing archaeology and trekking through the jungle. And I'd learned about that kind of resilience before, but this was the first time to do it in a working environment and to test it out, really, and at an appropriate age. So I came out of cruise ships after 3 years. I gave myself a year to find a job that I wanted to do as a photographer. And if I didn't get it, I'd go back onto the cruise ships. So I looked everywhere. I thought about going back onto labs. There was a job in Hong Kong. I'm working in labs. And then I thought, well, maybe for travel. I looked at being a driver through Africa, for the big trucks and all that sort of stuff. But then the one I saw was in the British Journal of Photography, was being a crime scene photographer for the Met Police. So I applied for that. Didn't think I'd got it because it was 3 months. And was just about to go back on ships when I got through and said, yeah, you've got the job.
Wow.
So
that's what you've been doing for how many years now? Because
I've done that for 24 years.
And there's a lot of stories in that I'm sure don't relate to DeckTales, but that's why you're writing a book, isn't it?
Well, I've written a couple of fiction books.
That's right.
But now I'm writing my autobiography.
So do you want to give, for the benefit of the listeners, future tense, the names of the books that you've written or the books that you're writing now?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I mean, my first book is, funny enough, not inspired. It's created through the warped ideas I got listening to my dad's tales of Scientology. It's called The Many Lives of Adam Capello.
Adam Capello. Okay. That was the first book?
That's the first book. And then the second book is in the same world, but it's more commercial, if you like. And it's It's a re-investigation into Jack the Ripper by basically interviewing the victims of the Ripper.
All right.
Who died, the reincarnated victims. And it's called Killing Time. And they're both by M.W. Taylor.
Mark, what's the W stand for?
William.
Mark William Taylor. There we go. M.W. Taylor.
Yeah. M.W. Taylor, because there's so many Mark Taylors that I just had to have an M.W.
Was there a particular standout, embarrassing moment within your tenure on cruise ships?
Yeah, not really.
No?
I mean, not that bad. I mean, the worst thing maybe when we went to St. Bart's, and I went on a nudist beach, and then and I was just naked there, and I asked a girl if I could have a picture taken with her, like an idiot, and she just told me to go away. Just stupid little embarrassing moments like that.
Timing is everything, Mark.
Yes, exactly. It wasn't the right place all the time, really. Yeah, I mean, maybe I should have stayed on the cruise ships longer myself anyway. Things were changing a lot. You felt like you had to get back to a normal life, but who knows, my life would have been very different if I'd have stayed just 2 years longer, something like that.
2 years longer, you could have copied your old your old colleague who invested in his captain's license and become one yourself.
Absolutely. I could be living in Barbados now, maybe.
That sounds like a very savvy way to stay out and about. Obviously, there's a romanticism in your mind, I'm sure, of the days you spent at sea, because there were periods where just it's a tranquility. You're away from the rat race. You're not in traffic every day because you're already at work. You can bypass that whole aspect of going to work in the morning and just enjoy it for what it is. Well,
I mean, I used to get the passengers. I'm doing the restaurant shots, and I go around and they go, "Don't you get bored doing this?" In front of all their mates all laughing. I go, "What do you do, sir?" And he goes, "I work in the city." I went, "And you're asking me if I get bored?" And they just laugh at him. Then you're out and about. You're just having fun. You're not going to do it for the rest of your life.
And that's why it's so hard for some people to give up that lifestyle, because it is quite addictive. And as you quite rightly said, truthfully, that it's taking you a long time to get over, and that you'll always have fond memories of it. And you've always got these stories with the cockroaches and the trials and tribulations of what it offered you. But it's been
how long has it been for you now?
But I finished in 2010.
Right, so you're obviously with this, it means you're still stuck in that. It's something like this, so
which is why it's the young that work on board, and it's usually quite heavily attended by those in retirement.
Yeah, well, they're the only ones who've got the money and the time as well.
Exactly. So the two kind of work in old and young. We're in tandem with each other out at sea, which is where I guess we kind of do a lot of story swapping and growing up ourselves.
Yeah, but it's been nice talking, because obviously I don't get to talk 2 hours about cruise ships to people most time. So yeah.
Thanks again for coming on to DeckTales and sharing with us some of your stories. I really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure there's lots more that you've got to impart. But I wish you all the luck with your books. Lovely to see you, and hopefully see you on set another time soon.
Will do. See you, mate.
Take care, mate.
So there you have it. That wraps it up for this episode of DeckTales. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've been entertained by the tales of laughter, camaraderie and the occasional stormy sea, don't forget to subscribe, rate and leave a review. Your feedback helps us to navigate the podcast waters and continue bringing you these fascinating stories. Before I sign off, if you'd like to share your own ship stories for future episodes, then I'd love to hear from you. Simply get in touch over the socials, because after all, the best stories often come from our listeners. As we navigate through the waters of life, remember to enjoy the journey as much as the destination, as well as those you choose to share the adventure with. I've been your captain, Sammy Catlin. Until next time, fair winds, smooth sailing, and may your adventures be as unforgettable as those shared on DeckTales. Bon voyage.